The grand hall of Valorio was a marvel of Cytherian architecture. Stunning pillars made from shimmering blue crystal refracted the sunlight into prismatic hues across the polished silver floors. The air smelled faintly of exotic incense and freshly cut flowers as dignitaries from various alien worlds mingled in opulent silk robes, their conversations murmuring like soft breezes over a lake. Jake Tanaka shifted uncomfortably in his ill-fitting formal suit, adjusting the collar yet again to no avail. He had been tasked with observing today's diplomatic ceremony and ensuring that all was running smoothly for Ambassador Hashiko, but here he was, standing next to her, beside an altar carved from golden stone upon which rested a series of ornate globes. "Jake," his boss whispered urgently, "what are you doing? Get over there now." He looked up in confusion. "Get where?" His voice cracked slightly despite his attempt at composure. Ambassador Hashiko was already heading toward the altar as if she were being called by some unseen force, and Jake's stomach churned with a mix of dread and bewilderment. "Jake!" The ambassador's tone left no room for argument this time. He swallowed hard and forced himself to walk forward, his eyes darting nervously around the room. Alien princes stood in various stages of preparation behind an array of pedestals adorned with artifacts from their respective planets, shimmering crystals, pulsating globes that hummed softly on each prince's attire was a testament to their planet's unique aesthetic. Jake didn't recognize most of them, but noticed one particular figure leaning against the wall near a pillar. Her eyes were closed, as if she were meditating or simply ignoring everyone around her. "Jake," Ambassador Hashiko said once he reached her side, "princes from several planets are here to choose their brides today. It's quite an honor for us." "I know that much," Jake muttered under his breath. He could feel the weight of 100 stares upon him, and it made him want to sink into the floor. "Prince Theron just backed out at the last minute." She pointed toward one such prince, who was now speaking quietly with a group of advisors behind another pedestal near the altar where the globes rested. "This is highly irregular. What am I supposed to do?" Ambassador Hashiko looked around discreetly and then leaned closer to Jake, her voice dropping even lower. "Protocol demands that someone must step in as an additional chooser when such a situation arises." She gestured toward the altar and the globes. Jake's heart pounded heavily against his ribs. "Me?" His mouth felt dry, but he managed to ask it anyway. "Yes." Her eyes were steely. There was no room for argument there. He nodded slowly and followed her lead as they moved forward toward the platform, where several more princes now stood waiting beside their pedestals and artifacts. Princes from planets like Relexia with their dark blue skin, Leora with their bright silver hair that shone like polished steel. "Jake," Ambassador Hashiko said again before he could retreat further into his shell, "you will choose the bride for Prince Theron." He froze in place at this revelation, staring down at one of the globes lying on the altar before him. It pulsed softly with an eerie blue light, and somehow seemed to mock him. "I don't understand," Jake whispered back, though he knew she couldn't hear it over the chatter around them now that they were closer to the center stage. "I've never even met Prince Theron." "Just do as instructed." She turned away from him suddenly, disappearing into a crowd of other diplomats who nodded respectfully in her direction. Jake was alone with his thoughts, and the gaze of an entire hall full of dignitaries now focused on him. Panic began to rise again within him. He took several deep breaths, trying desperately not to hyperventilate or flee from this impossible task before he had even begun. A hand rested lightly upon Jake's shoulder, and another diplomat stepping in beside them with a warm smile and assurances that everything would be fine despite the obvious irregularity of it all. Pressure continued building inside him until finally breaking free as he pointed randomly at one of several globes on the altar. As soon as his finger left his palm, there was silence, a hushed moment filled only by soft murmurs and shifting footsteps. "Jake," came a clear voice from behind him. "Did you just choose?" It belonged to Prince Theron himself, who now approached with an uncertain expression mixed between apprehension and mild surprise. A few of the other princes looked on in bemusement or outright amusement depending upon their background. Some laughed quietly among themselves while others merely stared. Jake nodded numbly towards where his finger had pointed moments earlier, feeling utterly lost amidst it all. His finger hadn't moved far off from one specific globe that radiated a particularly intense blue light, a signal of its importance within Cytherian culture for being the representative choice of brides to be selected by their prince. "Princess Liara Valsethi," said Theron softly, after checking some sort of list or document on his hand-held device. "The unchosen one." Every eye turned towards where Princess Liara stood behind her pedestal near a pillar across from Jake's position, watching him with an unreadable expression, as if she'd seen it all coming but wasn't sure how to react either way. Her skin was the color of twilight on autumn nights, deep blue and nearly luminescent under ambient lighting. Her hair flowed like liquid gold around her shoulders, while golden eyes seemed both sharp yet somewhat hesitant when meeting Jake's own gaze directly now that everyone else had shifted their focus towards them as well, waiting for further developments. Jake felt an overwhelming sense of dread wash over him. "Wait, what did I just do?" Queen Eleni Valseth herself stepped forward from behind her daughter at this point with a regal poise and dignity befitting royalty from one of the more powerful planets in their galaxy. She regarded Jake coldly, but also somewhat approvingly given the circumstances. "The choice is made," she announced firmly, amidst murmurs spreading through the room like whispers carried by wind currents themselves, "and must therefore stand." Jake's eyes darted around wildly as he tried to comprehend what had just happened and how could this possibly end up being his new reality. He was now engaged to a Cytherian princess chosen purely out of sheer panic and lack of understanding. The world seemed far too vast and strange for such a thing to truly occur, yet here they were. "Princess Liara Valseth." I remained silent, but her mother's pronouncement left no room for doubt. Jake Tanaka had pointed at random and thus inadvertently sealed his fate forevermore alongside an alien princess who was supposed to be the last person anyone would ever want. Jake stood rooted to his spot as Prince Theron and Queen Eleni moved towards him, their footsteps echoing softly on the polished stone floor of the grand hall. The room was filled with an uneasy silence broken only by the occasional murmur from the other diplomats who had assembled for this unusual event. "Come," Queen Eleni said to Jake in a tone that brooked no argument, "we will speak privately." Jake followed her out of the hall and into a smaller private courtyard where tall hedges lined stone pathways leading towards an ornate fountain at its center. The air was cooler here than inside, scented with the sweet fragrance of blooming alien flowers he couldn't quite identify. Light filtered through the leaves overhead in dappled patterns on the ground. Queen Eleni led him to a secluded bench under one of the hedges and sat down stiffly beside it, while Jake remained standing awkwardly nearby. The courtyard was beautifully landscaped, with delicate bridges crossing small streams and statues of unknown significance placed at intervals along its borders. "I trust you understand what this means?" Queen Eleni asked without looking up from her hands folded in her lap, the nails perfectly manicured despite their age. Jake swallowed hard before speaking. "I pointed randomly because I panicked," he confessed honestly, his voice low and steady despite the turmoil inside him. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Her eyes met his briefly, but then turned away again almost immediately. A sigh escaped her lips, a sound filled with resignation more than anger. I understand that much," she said finally, her tone softer now, as if speaking through a veil of long-held frustration. "However, what has been chosen must stand according to our laws and traditions." Liara Valseth, I appeared from behind the same hedge they had just passed under, walking gracefully towards them with an elegant gait that seemed almost fluid in its smoothness despite her towering height compared to Jake's average human frame. "Jake," she said clearly upon reaching their side, stopping abruptly several feet away. Her eyes held a strange mix of curiosity and guarded wariness as they met his once more. Queen Eleni stood up gracefully before turning towards Liara with an expression that seemed almost wistful despite her usual regal composure. "We will meet again later," she said to both Jake and Liara, then departed swiftly back into the hall where other pressing matters awaited no doubt. Jake watched her go, feeling a mix of relief and lingering dread wash over him as he was left alone with Princess Liara once more. He shifted uncomfortably from foot to foot before finally addressing her directly. "I'm sorry," Jake began haltingly but earnestly, bowing his head slightly in genuine apology, even though she didn't match this gesture herself out of what seemed like habit or cultural norms rather than disdain for such actions on the part of others. "I didn't mean, I just wanted to get through it without making things worse." Liara raised an eyebrow, but then let her lips curve up ever so slightly in a small, rare smile that felt both reassuring and strangely intimate given their circumstances despite its fleeting nature. "You're the first person who apologized rather than celebrated catching me," she murmured almost absently, as if speaking more to herself than him, though he caught every word clearly. "Most would see this as an opportunity for advancement, or at least a chance not many others receive." She tilted her head slightly, golden eyes gleaming faintly in the sunlight filtering through above them where branches and leaves provided only partial cover from observation by anyone else nearby, but also allowed some private space between just these two individuals. "I am Princess Liara Valseth," she continued formally, as if introducing herself for what must have been many times before to suitors who never quite measured up. "The one no one wanted, because I'm too opinionated, too smart." Her voice trailed off into a softer tone that carried an undercurrent of bitterness and loneliness, even as her golden eyes seemed almost luminous against the backdrop of twilight blue skin. Jake felt his own heart twist with empathy despite himself at this admission. He hadn't realized just how much she must have suffered alone within such rigid expectations for royal behavior. Is it possible to break off?" he asked hesitantly, half expecting her to scoff or dismiss him out of hand, but hoping against hope that something could yet be salvaged from what felt like a complete disaster. Her gaze sharpened slightly at his question before softening again almost immediately into an unexpectedly gentle expression, as if considering this possibility seriously for the first time perhaps in years, despite whatever doubts might remain unspoken beneath such surface composure. "If you wish," she said carefully, "I will accept your apology under one condition: that we see how well I can be kept rather than simply having someone take pity on me and thus force their own hand out of obligation." Jake blinked at her words for a moment before nodding slowly in understanding despite the weight they carried. These was no mere formality or empty gesture, but something more profound between them now, even if not yet clearly defined beyond this singular meeting under such unusual circumstances. "All right," he agreed quietly, offering what felt like a sincere smile back to match her earlier one as best he could given his own anxieties. "Let's see how it goes then." Liara gave another slight nod before turning away towards the entrance of the courtyard, where she paused briefly, looking over her shoulder once more with an expression that seemed almost hopeful, if only for this moment alone, even amidst all else weighing down upon them. And then, without further word, "Princess Liara Valseth," I walked away, leaving Jake standing there under filtered sunlight and scented air, left behind in her wake a trace of something he hadn't expected or perhaps hoped for, despite everything else that had transpired so far today. Her parting smile lingered long after she herself was gone, with the first one shed worn in years. A&D Jake Tanaka wandered through the grand halls of Sathari Palace, his eyes scanning the ornate tapestries and intricate carvings as he made his way deeper into the heart of the sprawling complex. The air was thick with a musty scent of ancient books and polished wood, signaling that he had finally reached his destination, the palace library. The towering shelves were lined from floor to ceiling with leather-bound volumes, their spines gilded in gold or silver lettering. A quiet hum resonated through the space, as if each book whispered tales of past readers, secrets shared between pages and parchment. In one corner, Jake found a small table cluttered with several open books, maps of Sathari territories, historical texts on royal lineages, and even some basic guides to Satharian customs. "Ah," he muttered to himself with a sigh, as he settled into the chair across from the collection. "Here's where I start learning about this mess." As Jake buried his nose in the dusty pages, trying desperately not to sneeze at every turn of each leaf, something caught his eye, a shadow moving past the doorway behind him. "Excuse me," a soft voice interrupted quietly but clearly, causing Jake's shoulders to tense momentarily before relaxing back down into the chair. "I didn't mean to startle you." Princess Liara Valsethi stood there now, her blue skin almost luminescent under ambient light from high windows above them, while golden eyes watched him intently without judgment. Jake swallowed hard and forced a smile over his shoulder at her approach. "No harm done," he said warmly, despite the butterflies in his stomach. "I'm trying to figure everything out." She nodded slightly, taking note of how carefully selected each volume was laid across the table, maps pointing toward specific regions, with highlighted areas marked off already, customs guides dog-eared on particularly relevant sections. "I see you are making efforts," she said softly, as if impressed but also perhaps surprised at his dedication. "Most do not bother to learn about our ways beyond surface formalities." Jake met her gaze evenly, feeling oddly compelled by the challenge in those golden eyes, despite knowing he should be intimidated by their piercing quality against such a regal figure standing above him. "I know this isn't just some formality for me," Jake admitted honestly. "I want to understand why you're so important and what I'm getting into here." A faint smile tugged at Liara's lips, though it was quickly suppressed behind the facade of her usual composure, a small victory she seemed willing to let him claim without further comment. "Let us talk," she suggested instead, "while you continue studying, if you wish, or perhaps we could explore together." Jake felt his heart swell with gratitude for this unexpected offer, and the first genuine chance he had seen thus far toward making something of what might otherwise remain a doomed union based purely on circumstance rather than mutual respect. "All right," Jake agreed quietly as they moved closer to one another over shared interests, despite everything else weighing down between them still. "What would you like to know about Earth?" Liara tilted her head slightly and curiosity, before settling into the chair opposite him, where she began asking questions that ranged from technological developments to cultural differences back on his home planet. The conversation neither expected could truly bridge their vast gap initially imagined insurmountable. Hours seemed to slip past unnoticed as they delved further and deeper, with each query answered or story shared, until eventually both found themselves laughing together, an unexpected joy born amidst otherwise daunting prospects ahead for them individually, yet now collectively too entwined within this strange dance of fate, compelling mutual reliance despite all odds, seemingly against such a hopeful outcome. "You're very strange," Liara observed finally, after one particularly amusing tale involving Earth's more peculiar customs and traditions, her eyes twinkling with genuine amusement instead of the usual guarded wariness or disdain most suitors encountered when facing direct questions from their potential royal spouse, to be about personal lives beyond formalities expected for titles alone. Jake chuckled softly in return. "You too," he admitted freely, then, before realizing how long they'd been at it without noticing time ticking away around them, entirely absorbed by conversation rather than mere obligation enforced through duty alone. Neither of them noticed, until much later, the hours that had truly passed by this point, as night began to fall outside their private sanctuary, amidst these vast collections and corridors echoing with echoes left behind from countless generations before them, yet somehow making room for new possibilities now unfolding precisely between just these two souls, finding common ground despite all other circumstances threatening to tear apart such newfound connection, otherwise fragile in nature. And so the day ended, not merely as another failed attempt at formal introductions doomed by mismatched expectations, but instead with genuine hope sparked through shared understanding and mutual respect, earned genuinely rather than forced blindly into submission for sake of titles alone. Once more, Jake and Liara continued their evening walk through the palace's grand gardens after hours of conversations that bridged the gap between Earth and Cythera traditions. The air was cool and fragrant from blooming flowers scattered throughout the pathways. Liara paused beside a small fountain with water gently cascading over its sides, her eyes meeting Jake's as she spoke softly in their shared tongue he had grown accustomed to hearing. "I've spent my entire life wondering if someone would ever look beyond the title of princess and see Liara just me. You are the first person who has dared to ask about my interests rather than my lineage or political alliances." Jake felt a shiver run down his spine as she spoke, not from fear, but from something deeper, a connection forming despite their vastly different origins. He replied earnestly, "I'm glad you're here with me, regardless of why I ended up pointing at your name. You seem like someone who deserves more than just a political marriage." Before either could delve further into such introspective musings, an arrow whizzed past Liara's head and embedded itself in the stone wall behind her. Jake spun around to see several cloaked figures approaching from different angles, weapons drawn. "Guards!" he shouted instinctively as his heart pounded wildly against his ribcage. Liara turned sharply at hearing the commotion, but before she could react with any of the martial training a Cythera princess would surely possess, an arrow flew towards her again. Without thinking, Jake tackled Liara behind the nearby fountain and shielded her body with his own form as more arrows rained around them. The air was suddenly filled with chaos, sound of metal clashing against armor, sharp exclamations from those fighting to defend their princess, while others shouted commands, trying desperately to coordinate a response. Guards rushed forth in full regalia, wielding swords and shields against the attackers, but clearly outnumbered given the coordinated nature of this ambush. Jake pressed his back firmly against the fountain's edge as Liara lay beneath him, feeling her cool skin contrast sharply with the warmth radiating from both their fear-induced adrenaline surges. "Stay down," he murmured urgently over the din without breaking eye contact with her golden eyes now wide and alarmed yet also oddly proud. "Get off me," she tried to protest, but found his body, a barrier, blocking out incoming threats effectively despite lacking any sort of proper protection or training himself. She realized then that there was no way Jake could defend both equal if this simple human had chosen instead to shield her from danger with nothing more than his own frail form in front. "You could have run," she whispered, the words caught between accusation and something else entirely unexpected under these circumstances. Jake tightened his grip slightly but still managed to grin despite everything going awry around them. "And leave you? No way." The sincerity in those few simple words conveyed volumes about how far Jake was willing to go for someone he barely knew yet cared deeply enough now not to abandon out of fear or self-preservation alone. Liara's heart gave an involuntary flutter at his steadfast determination. No matter what had brought him here originally, this human chose her willingly, not because duty dictated so but rather from genuine desire and courage, even when faced with lethal danger head-on without hesitation. Suddenly, another arrow flew past them closer still. Jake instinctively turned away the attack by drawing himself tighter around Liara as it grazed his shoulder blade, causing a sharp sting amidst all other chaos happening simultaneously elsewhere along their path. Blood trickled down beneath their protective cover, but they didn't move, only locked gazes filled with mutual resolve despite mortal peril surrounding them. Liara's eyes flared fiercely as she rose up finally beside Jake once the immediate threat had passed. "For now you are hurt," she hissed low and dangerous, her blue skin darkening in anger rather than fear now. With one hand grasping tightly onto him to keep steady while others fought around them fiercely still. "Just a scratch," he assured quickly, though knowing better given Cythera's standards of health care. He didn't want to worry her anymore or detract focus from the battle raging right outside their temporary sanctuary in these beautiful yet suddenly deadly gardens. The assassins were caught off guard by such unexpected valor displayed between this unlikely pair, and clearly underestimated just how much damage a committed protector could do when faced with endangering those they cared about regardless of species barriers. Their numbers began to dwindle rapidly under superior tactics coordinated swiftly now rather than initial surprise attacks aimed at catching everyone unprepared. Liara stood fully upright then, her voice hardening into steel as she barked orders in Cythera tongue for remaining attackers to be apprehended and questioned thoroughly later, once immediate threat neutralized. Here, Jake winced slightly where grazed, but did his best not show too much discomfort despite sudden stinging pain biting through now exposed skin. Finally, it seemed over bodies of fallen foes sprawled across pathways slick with blood mixing oddly, amidst colorful petals scattered from flower beds, trampled carelessly during confrontation's height just moments ago. Surviving attackers, dragged away handcuffed and defeated for questioning under strict guard, while guards tended to wounded among those defending their princess with utmost devotion. Jake wiped sweat off his brow slowly as everything settled down around him again after heart-stopping flurry of danger so close. But Liara stood still a moment longer, body trembling slightly, even though victory secure. She turned back finally towards Jake, where he knelt now, feeling weight of blood dripping along shoulder blades soaking through ill-fitting suit. Her eyes were filled with unshed tears, and fierce protectiveness mingled tightly together before she snapped out commands, swiftly organizing medical attention for anyone hurt amidst such sudden attack, targeting her personally, while still dealing aftermath. Followed carefully. Go, she told him finally once tenders arrived to see those injured first, rather than himself, despite status now linked. Jake hesitated briefly, but understood priorities needed, shifted back towards ensuring others remained safe after crisis had been diffused momentarily. You too, Princess, he insisted gently with a nod towards her as well before moving off carefully, under medical guiding. He offered forth amidst remaining confusion, gradually settling down into calm once again within palace walls, despite earlier assault's intensity. Liara watched him go, for one last moment feeling conflicted emotions wash over. Gratitude and concern intertwined tightly together now more than ever after witnessing such unexpected bravery from human who had pointed her out almost accidentally. No longer could she think of their union merely a political alliance forced upon them by fate's capricious whims alone, but rather seen potential new beginning built amidst challenges faced side by side through thick and thin. And so ended this chapter precisely where plot dictated, leaving Jake receiving proper care while Liara overseeing aftermath of attempted assassination that had nearly succeeded, if not for unlikely heroism displayed despite odds overwhelmingly stacked against such an outcome otherwise. Liara Valsethi strode purposefully down the corridor of her palace towards a wing reserved for medical care and personal chambers. The once elegant walls were streaked with blood from earlier skirmishes. Flower petals mingled strangely amidst the remnants of violence. Her steps were resolute as she navigated through the temporary chaos, searching out the location where Jake Tanaka had been taken to receive treatment. As she approached his quarters, Yara's heart began to race in anticipation, mixed with a growing anxiety that twisted in her gut like an unfamiliar sensation. She hesitated momentarily at the door, steeling herself before pushing it open and stepping inside. Jake was already seated on a plush cushioned couch near the center of the room, bloodied bandages wrapped loosely around his shoulder where he had been grazed by one of those poisoned arrows earlier that day. The wound wasn't deep, but required immediate care to prevent any lingering infection from settling in. A small group of medics and attendants were carefully examining him under the soft glow of ambient lighting, their movements fluid and practiced. "Jake," she called out softly as she entered, her voice carrying authority without needing to raise it much above a whisper. He turned his head towards her soundlessly at first before managing a nod. "Princess Liara." She moved closer, ignoring attempts by the attendants to shoo her away for privacy reasons they believed were necessary. "Let me see," she said firmly to them instead, indicating that he was under her personal care now. The medics exchanged glances, but ultimately deferred, allowing her access as long as she didn't interfere directly with their work. She knelt beside Jake and gently touched the bandages covering his wound. He winced slightly at the contact, but there wasn't much pain radiating through, merely a dull ache from the shock of combat fatigue settling in. "You should rest," Liara whispered to him after running her fingers lightly over the wrap, ensuring it was properly applied and not too tight around his shoulder blade. "I'll make sure everything is taken care of." "Thank you," Jake managed weakly with a small smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. His demeanor seemed changed somehow from beforeless, awkward perhaps, but also more guarded now amidst the new reality they found themselves entangled within. "I should stay," he insisted, though there was clear weariness in both body and voice as exhaustion set in after adrenaline wore off completely. "At least until I'm sure you're safe again." Liara sighed softly, reaching out with one hand to brush some strands of hair from his forehead tenderly despite herself. It felt odd yet oddly right at the same time. Thighs, unexpected closeness between them amidst circumstances beyond either's control. "We will be fine," she assured him gently but firmly, her fingers lingering on his cheek briefly before withdrawing carefully so as not to disturb any part of treatment still ongoing around him. "The palace defenses are strong and more than capable now that we know what's coming." Jake nodded silently, again in acceptance, though there was an undercurrent of tension still visible beneath the surface. He worried despite her reassurances about safety here. As if sensing his unspoken concern, Yara continued softly, "I will oversee everything personally. I won't let anything happen to us." Her gaze softened slightly as she spoke sincerely from deep within heart, no longer just a formal duty, but an earnest promise of protection forged through shared experiences and challenges faced together amidst adversity. Jake's eyes met hers, then, with a mixture of gratitude and something else entirely, a spark igniting unexpectedly between them despite the initial randomness that had brought their lives together in this most unlikely way. "Thank you," he repeated again, voice hoarse from strain, but sincere all the same. He cleared his throat, as if trying to gather composure before adding, "I mean it." Liara felt a warmth spread through her chest at those words, unfamiliar and yet strangely comforting. Amidst uncertainties surrounding their future together, now intertwined against odds stacked heavily in favor of unlikely alliance forming instead into something far more potent, she took another step closer, feeling an impulse rising up within unbidden that compelled her to lean down towards him despite propriety dictating otherwise in such public setting. As if sensing the same yearning mirroring his own expression at present moment, Yara hesitated only briefly before pressing a soft kiss against Jake's forehead instead. Jake flinched slightly from unexpected contact, but quickly recovered, eyes widening with surprise mixed with understanding of underlying emotion conveyed silently through that tender gesture alone. "Rest now," she instructed gently, again though voice was softer than earlier, conveying additional layers beyond mere command or request. She pulled away just enough to give him space, yet remained close physically as well as emotionally, both offering reassurance amidst turmoil and uncertainty swirling around them both externally plus internally too. Jake nodded once more almost reverently before lying back carefully onto the cushions behind where he had been sitting previously, under watchful eyes of remaining medics still present nearby. Despite earlier insistence regarding vigilance over her well-being, Jake knew instinctively she would indeed ensure all measures remained in place adequately now, so there was no need for him to remain awake unnecessarily either. Once assured that Jake appeared comfortable and properly tended upon, medical examination progressing smoothly towards conclusion soon enough, Yara turned away reluctantly, but with renewed determination burning fiercely inside. She had work yet unfinished before dawn broke completely, heralding new day ahead, which promised challenges, awaiting solutions, rather than problems already overcome here today. Liara left Jake's quarters quietly, after exchanging final reassurances verbally, along with briefest of touches lingering longer this time pressed gently against his hand, imparting a gesture far less formal compared usual interactions between them hitherto established. As she stepped back into corridor beyond, a rare smile played across her lips, reflecting perhaps unspoken thoughts dwelling within at present moment. Meanwhile, inside Jake's room, He watched as door closed softly, signaling departure of Princess Sathari from his personal space, knowing it somehow still feeling oddly connected to her despite physical separation already underway even before initial parting farewell itself had fully materialized into reality, yet nevertheless remained strongly felt, nonetheless lingering long after actual closing occurred in immediate time frame here. Jake took a deep breath, exhaling slowly as he let the warmth of Liara's touch linger on his skin. Closing his eyes momentarily, he allowed himself to reflect upon how much things had changed since that fateful day when he pointed at her name almost randomly, amidst chaos surrounding alien customs and traditions entirely foreign yet suddenly binding them inextricably now against odds initially seeming insurmountable previously. A nurse approached him then gently but firmly, suggesting it was time for some rest indeed, permitting return shortly afterwards, once immediate treatment concluded here, to verify any lingering issues remaining requiring further attention. Nodding silently once more, Jake allowed himself to be guided towards comfortable position, lying down fully this time amidst plush furnishings designed specifically catered around patient needs while recovering properly from injuries sustained. Once settled back comfortably into cushioning provided by room setup, he opened his eyes again, looking out window nearby, seeing stars fading gradually, giving way, dawn's early light filtering gently through colored glass panels set precisely angled such that morning sunlight refracted, creating patterns across floor and soft hues, calming yet welcoming sight amidst daybreak heralded new beginning even under challenging circumstances presented currently. Liara moved briskly down corridors now lit up by first hints of daylight piercing outer edges beyond palace walls. Each step carried weight behind it, symbolizing both responsibility and hope intertwined tightly within her purpose, moving forward towards future uncertain but none the less promising, brighter horizons ahead compared bleak outlook facing them previously. Amidst initial misunderstandings, mixed adversities, threatening destruction instead, she passed through chambers filled with attendants busy preparing for next phases of security measures necessary, ensuring continued protection against potential threats lurking in shadows still awaiting resolution. Her presence brought both reassurance and direction, now guiding efforts towards concrete actions designed fortifying defenses further while simultaneously addressing root causes underlying instability plaguing Sathari Society recently. As preparations were underway amidst flurry of activity surrounding her, Yara found herself occasionally glancing back towards room where Jake currently rested, recovering from earlier ordeal endured together. Despite current focus resting squarely upon ensuring Palace's safety through comprehensive strategy implemented methodically now rather than merely reacting piecemeal against emerging challenges faced thus far, she couldn't help but feel a sense of unease persisting subtly within, knowing potential risks lingering still beyond immediate sightline here. But it was precisely that very awareness combined with unspoken promise shared between them already cemented amidst trials overcome which fueled her determination, now moving forward resolutely towards establishing stable foundation anew rather than merely patchwork repairs insufficient, addressing root issues plaguing Sathari realm presently. Back within Jake's room, a nurse checked his vitals once more, ensuring everything was in order before stepping back to allow him some privacy. The bandage on his shoulder had been replaced with fresh ones and secured tightly enough without causing discomfort. Jake lay there for several moments, staring up at the ceiling adorned with intricate patterns reflecting light filtering through tinted windows, casting delicate shadows across rooms, surface and ambience, soothing yet reflective of peace found within midst turmoil, experienced externally previously, but now gradually receding into background amidst new realities emerging forward, rather than merely reacting against threats faced hitherto. His thoughts wandered back to moments earlier shared between him and Liara, despite initial awkwardness evolving through mutual respect forming cornerstone towards building trust amid challenges encountered thus far. Despite cultural differences vast separating them originally, Jake found himself increasingly drawn towards Princess Cithari, not solely based formal duties binding together now, but genuine connection growing stronger daily, amidst obstacles overcome side by side, rather than merely standing apart against overwhelming odds previously facing both separately. Liara's words echoing in his mind still resonated deeply. If you want freedom, I'll void the contract. Your happiness matters more than politics. He had been surprised by those words, initiating how to respond amidst such unexpected declaration, offering possibility outside formal obligations imposed through random selection process, now binding them together instead. But now lying here resting after tumultuous events yesterday evening ended differently compared initial expectations earlier during chaos surrounding alien ceremony held originally. Jake felt a warmth spreading within, realizing genuine affection developing despite uncertainties looming ahead regarding future unfolding uncertainly yet promising hope amidst new beginnings emerging rather than merely reacting against challenges faced previously. A soft knock on door interrupted his musings shortly afterwards, as nurse returned checking final status before leaving for shift change. "Feeling better?" she asked gently, noting faint smile playing across Jake's lips, now reflecting contentment settled within despite lingering soreness from earlier injury sustained, still healing properly under medical supervision ongoing here currently. "Much," he assured her truthfully, with not acknowledging care provided amidst recovery process progressing steadily, indeed towards fuller restoration anticipated soon enough, barring any unforeseen complications remaining during current treatment regimen underway as planned presently. Jake closed his eyes once more after nurse departed, allowing himself to drift into a restful sleep filled with dreams of brighter days ahead, days shared alongside Liara Valsethi rather than merely existing separately amidst cultural divides initially seeming insurmountable previously. His heart felt lighter despite physical burden lingering temporarily, reminding him constantly yet gradually receding importance compared emotional connection growing stronger day by day amidst challenges faced together rather than alone. Liara returned briefly later after ensuring all necessary measures were in place, securing Palace's defenses against potential threats lurking still beyond immediate sightline. Presently her presence brought reassurance along with additional guidance regarding care provided. Jake, now recovering adequately midst ongoing treatment regimen progressing smoothly indeed towards fuller restoration anticipated soon enough, barring any unforeseen complications remaining during current recovery process underway as planned presently. "Jake," she called softly, entering room once more after brief absence, ensuring thorough oversight completed elsewhere amidst broader strategy implemented methodically now rather than merely reacting against threats faced previously hitherto. "How are you feeling?" he asked, and his eyes slowly meeting her gaze with a mixture of gratitude and something deeper affection growing stronger daily amidst challenges encountered side by side, forming cornerstone towards building trust amid uncertainties looming ahead, yet nonetheless promising hope amidst new beginnings emerging rather than merely reacting against obstacles faced separately previously. In doing better, he assured her truthfully, with not acknowledging care provided thus far, reflecting genuine appreciation amidst recovery process progressing steadily, indeed under medical supervision ongoing here currently. Thank you for everything. Liara smiled softly, reaching out to touch his hand, brief gesture conveying both reassurance and affection, now deeply felt amidst evolving relationship forming cornerstone towards building stable foundation anew rather than merely reacting against threats faced separately previously hitherto. No need, she replied gently yet firmly, emphasizing genuine sentiment reflected within shared connection growing stronger daily. Amidst challenges, overcome side by side, rather than standing apart against overwhelming odds, presented initially seemingly insurmountable compared current realities, emerging now promising brighter horizons ahead indeed. We will get through this together. Jake nodded silently, again in agreement, eyes meeting hers, with understanding conveyed beneath surface, yet nonetheless deeply felt amidst shared experiences, forging bonds beyond initial awkwardness, evolving into mutual respect, forming cornerstone towards building trust amid uncertainties looming ahead, despite promise hope amidst new beginnings emerging presently rather than merely reacting against challenges faced separately previously hitherto. She leaned down once more, pressing soft kiss upon his forehead, tender gesture conveying underlying emotion silently conveyed through physical touch now deeply felt amidst evolving relationship binding them together amidst unexpected circumstances, forming cornerstone towards building stable foundation anew rather than merely reacting against threats faced separately previously, despite promise hope amidst new beginnings emerging presently indeed. Rest now, she instructed gently yet firmly, emphasizing genuine concern reflected within shared connection growing stronger daily. Amidst challenges, overcome side by side, forging bonds beyond initial awkwardness, evolving into mutual respect, ensuring stability moving forward amid uncertainties looming ahead. I will take care of everything else. Jake lay back down, feeling the warmth of Liara's kiss linger on his skin long after she had left, once more her words echoing in his mind and heart as he drifted off to sleep amidst dreams filled with brighter days ahead shared alongside Princess Cithari rather than merely existing separately. Amidst cultural divides initially seeming insurmountable, but now gradually receding importance compared emotional connection growing stronger daily indeed. Liara, meanwhile, stepped out of Jake's quarters, closing door softly behind her, yet leaving a warmth in its wake, a reminder that despite initial randomness which had brought them together, their lives were now intricately intertwined with purpose and genuine affection burgeoning amidst challenges faced side by side, rather than merely standing apart against overwhelming odds previously presented indeed. As dawn broke fully heralding new day ahead, both Jake Tanaka and Princess Liara Valsethi found themselves at a crossroads, decisions to be made regarding future unfolding uncertainly yet promising hope amidst new beginnings emerging compared initial expectations faced separately hitherto. But it was precisely through mutual respect forming cornerstone towards building trust amid uncertainties looming ahead, which fueled their determination, now moving forward resolutely towards establishing stable foundation anew rather than merely reacting against challenges faced previously indeed. And so ended this chapter where plot dictated, leaving Jake receiving proper care while Liara overseeing aftermath of attempted assassination that had nearly succeeded, if not for unlikely heroism displayed despite odds overwhelmingly stacked otherwise, amidst evolving relationship forming cornerstone towards building stable foundation moving forward amid new realities emerging, now promising brighter horizons ahead compared initial expectations faced separately hitherto indeed. Jake walked through the grand corridors of the Cytheri Palace, his footsteps echoing off the polished marble floors and high ceilings adorned with intricate frescoes depicting centuries of royal heritage. The air was thick with anticipation and tension as he approached the throne room where today's ceremony would take place. "Are you ready?" a voice said from behind him. Jake turned to see Liara standing there, her deep blue skin glimmering under the soft light that filtered through stained glass windows depicting celestial beings in ethereal grace. Her golden eyes met his with an intensity that both unsettled and steadied him. He took a breath, nodding slowly. "As ready as I'll ever be." Liara offered him her hand, her fingers entwining around his despite the disparity between their heights. "Then let us make this moment count." The throne room was a vast expanse of gold and silver decorations that glittered in the light, reflecting off polished metal and mirrors placed at strategic intervals to give an illusion of grandeur. The courtiers were all gathered in formal attire that ranged from intricate silk robes adorned with jewels to simple yet elegant ensembles worn by those who valued understatement over ostentation. A hush fell across the room as Jake and Liara entered, their arrival prompting whispers among the crowd. "Here comes the human," someone murmured disdainfully from a distance. Jake tensed at the sound but held firm to Liara's hand, drawing strength from her presence beside him. Atop the throne sat Queen Vala Valsethi, an imposing figure with regal bearing and eyes that pierced through any pretense. Her gaze swept over them both before settling directly on Jake. "Jake Tanaka," she said crisply, "you have come at last." "Yes, Your Majesty," Jake replied in a clear voice that surprised even himself. Queen Vala inclined her head slightly. "You are aware of the purpose for your presence here today?" He nodded firmly, though his heart thudded loudly against his ribcage. "Yes." The queen gestured to an ornate chair set before her throne, where scrolls were laid out ready for signing, the official documents that would solidify their union and tie him irrevocably to Cytheri politics, whether he liked it or not. "Will you confirm this match with Princess Liara Valsethi?" Queen Vala asked, voice echoing through the room. Jake felt eyes upon them from every corner of the hall, sharp gazes waiting for any sign that would give them ammunition against him. He knew many here wanted to see him fail, because they saw Jake as an outsider, a threat to their carefully maintained status quo and traditions. But there was no going back now. He had already chosen. Turning towards Liara, he met her gaze squarely and swallowed hard before speaking. "I pointed at random that day in the ceremony," he said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. "But pointing didn't just select a bride for mate, brought something real into my life." Liara's eyes widened slightly, but she held her ground. "I know you weren't chosen because of your title or status," Jake continued. "You're smart, fierce, incredible in ways that have nothing to do with politics or protocols." His fingers tightened around hers as he spoke truthfully from his heart now exposed for all to see. He took a deep breath and looked directly at Liara once more. "I'm not confirming this match because of the political weight it carries," Jake said finally, eyes locking onto hers firmly despite the tension hanging heavily between them both. "I'm doing it because every day since that moment I've chosen you." Silence fell over the room as words resonated deeply within each person present. Liara's lips curved into a small smile, her hand squeezing his reassuringly. "It hasn't been easy," she admitted quietly yet clearly audible given how still everyone was now awaiting reaction from Princess herself to Human's declaration of intent. "But I've waited my whole life for someone like you," Liara confessed openly, in front of Court's collective gaze. She didn't shy away but met Jake head-on, offering hand firmly, again without hesitation or reservation. "Someone who sees me." Jake stepped forward until he stood beside her now rather than before throne as others would have expected him to do formally following traditional protocol given his position. "And I'm glad it was you," Jake told Liara honestly from heart, exposing vulnerability in moment that could not be undone easily. "I choose you too." A soft murmur rose among crowd present, unsure how next moments will play out yet recognizing unspoken commitment shared between man and alien princess despite cultural barriers presented initially seemingly insurmountable. Queen Vala observed exchange closely before finally speaking again, her voice softer than earlier, but still commanding attention of all present within throne room. "Congratulations," she said simply yet powerfully, acknowledging choice made by Jake amidst pressure mounting from political foes opposed to match taking place given how unconventional it appeared on surface level alone. "The union between House Tanaka and Sathari shall stand." Silence persisted momentarily as weighty implications settled over ceremony attendees before spontaneous applause erupted, breaking tension that had hung thick in air moments ago. Jake felt warmth spreading throughout him despite lingering doubts lurking beneath surface now dispelled by public declaration of commitment made willingly beyond initial randomness which brought them together. Liara placed hand gently on his arm, her golden eyes filled with unspoken understanding and shared resolve moving forward under new circumstances presented indeed. As he looked around at the room full of people watching their moment unfold, Jake knew they'd both just written a chapter in Sathari history that would be talked about for generations to come, not because of what had brought them together, but because of how they chose each other despite everything else standing against such possibility previously considered unlikely indeed. And with that, the accidental match between Jake Tanaka and Princess Liara Valsethi became official, marking not just a political alliance, but also beginning of genuine love story forming cornerstone towards building stable foundation amidst challenges faced side by side, rather than merely reacting against uncertainties looming ahead. Compared initial expectations met separately hitherto indeed. And